the long-term effects of cortisol in our body ain't a good thing. We start becoming burnt out. And when we're used to being burnt out over and over and over, that's the worst, right? When we become adapted to a burnt out phase, we forget what it feels like to even feel healthy. Burnout, how many of us, man, shoot, I'm burned out once a month at least, but at least I know when I'm getting there. And I really want to share with you some of the tips that I do for myself, but first and foremost, I just want to talk about burnout. How many of you have experienced feeling burnt out? Now I'm going to go into what are the symptoms of it. But how many of you know really the place where you get to from being so stressed chronically where you kind of just go inward and don't want to do anything, you're done. A lot of us have felt that, right? It feels like your limbs are heavy, you're dragging around, your mood is unpredictable, Sometimes you feel good, sometimes you don't, and every little thing annoys you. You may have no appetite or you may be voracious. Either or. For me, what I experience is I feel overwhelmed, sometimes trapped. I don't feel motivated. I feel like I'm on a small hole, not a deep hole, but a small hole. I don't have much of an appetite. I start detaching myself from people that I care about or things that I need to do. I become, again, unmotivated. Why? I'll go into a little bit later. Certainly and definitely no creative flow. So it's really hard to put out content, or it's really hard to put out a show or put together a show that really is in alignment with what I want to say. Sometimes I self-sabotage, right? And sometimes I don't know why I do it. But really, over the years, I found how it starts manifesting in my body so I can catch it before I get to that point. And oftentimes I'm never even getting into that hole. So I want to share with you some things that we can do. So regardless of how it shows up for you, from time to time, we feel burnt out. So physiologically, we want to know what the heck happens in the body when we're burnt out. So our bodies are designed, and they're extraordinarily designed. They're incredible, they are elegant, they are sophisticated. We are so resilient and built to feel massive tidal waves of stress. We're not resilient and we're not built to feel massive tidal waves of stress over time, for long periods of time. So short-term effect of cortisol. So we're very different than animals in this, right? Animals are so hyper-present. They experience life in the moment. So when something quote-unquote bad happens, or there's a threat, they experience that hormonally through their body. And let's say they make it away from the lion into safety and solace, and they're under a tree. They have their mechanisms to shake out that energy, that extra energy. And then their cortisol levels go down. Their epinephrine levels go down, right? And then they go back to being in the moment. Unfortunately for us, we have so much trouble living in the moment. Now, fortunately for us also, we can project to the future and do things as a human race, right? But many times it bites us in the butt because by projecting to the future, you're convincing and speaking to your body that we are still in this present moment of hyper threat, hyper danger. And our body is going to listen to our thoughts very, very closely. So it behooves us, and this is part of finding out before when you get burnt out, when it's starting and what the thought, the sponsoring thought I call it, what is the very thing that the seed that starts creating that. So for us, short-term cortisol, we are built for it. When I'm talking about short-term cortisol, that means if something happens during the day, we almost get into an accident, we feel that rush, we get really hot, our heart starts beating, maybe our breath starts increasing and we're breathing more rapidly, maybe we just get hyper-focused in that moment, we don't think about eating, we don't think about peeing, we don't even think about pooping. We're just in that moment and we go, okay. And then we go about our lives and then we shake it off. Now, we are so built for that. Even if it lasts for a day, we're still built for that. What happens in the body is that in those moments of stress, we start making more sugar in our body, right? To feed us, to help us survive. So our liver starts mobilizing sugar. We start releasing more fatty acids. So we're giving our body more food and fuel, right? And it's very important because we need to survive, especially in high stress environments. Our blood sugar naturally is going to go up. And what's going to happen to our immune system is it's going to boost up, right? So in case we're threatened with an infection or an injury, our immune system is ready. It's hypervigilant. It's ready to go. So by virtue of all of that happening, our heart rate starts to increase, right? We increase our blood pressure naturally. Our bronchioles, our respiratory system begins to dilate so we can get more air in our bodies so we can survive. and our metabolic rate goes up. So we have fuel to survive in those moments. Now I'm talking about in the moment, in the day, maybe leading into the other day. But as soon as it starts going long term, and I'm talking about 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, a week, that's when our body starts suffering from this state, from the survival state. Now, a lot of us, like I said, unfortunately, we can project to the future. So it takes very little for many of us to start projecting to the future over and over. And that is when the loop starts beginning. And that's when we start becoming burned out because we're getting away from this present moment. So the long-term effects of cortisol in our body ain't a good thing. We start becoming burnt out. And when we're used to being burnt out over and over and over, that's the worst, right? When we become adapted to a burnt out phase, we forget what it feels like to even feel healthy or at peace or calm, for the nervous system to be in balance, and certainly our immune system to be strong. Over time, our immune system becomes depressed completely. We decrease our metabolism, we start gaining weight. Again, our immune system, by being depressed, we get worn down and then we're getting more sick more easily. But one of the most fascinating things is what happens to our neurotransmitters. Now, I just did a show on dopamine, and I talked all about the importance of dopamine in our brain health and mental health. What happens is, with our neurotransmitters, when we have a sustained secretion and circulation of cortisol in our body, it's going to disrupt our brain chemistry. And I'll bring this to light. There's a study, the name of it is Treatment-Related Alteration of Cortisol Predicts Change in Neuropsychological Function During Acute Treatment of Late Life Anxiety Disorder, right? And it's in the International Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry. What they saw was people with mood disorders like anxiety and depression have high levels of salivary cortisol. And you can test that. You can test how high the levels of cortisol are in your body throughout the day, and it fluctuates. It's supposed to be high in the morning. It's supposed to go down after you wake up from a peak all the way down till you go to sleep, and your melatonin is high, and then you fall asleep. And then that rhythm is supposed to happen. You have a cortisol rhythm. What happens is, in people with mood disorders like anxiety or depression, we have a sustained level of cortisol in our body. And it's no surprise, because then we get into that cycle. Cortisol is high. It affects our neurotransmitters. We experience things like anxiety and depression, more inflammation, and then guess what? More cortisol in response until we begin to get burnt out. But the most interesting thing for me is how cortisol, chronic cortisol, is going to start depleting things like dopamine and serotonin. So you may question, why when I get burnt out, does my motivation change? Well, interestingly enough, it's because the sustained high level of cortisol begins to disrupt your dopamine level. It's disrupting its release and its synthesis, right? So after dopamine becomes depleted, our pleasure pathways become burnt out. So it's not just dopamine too, it's serotonin. Both are becoming more and more depleted. So when you see things like depression or changes in sleep, memory issues, anxiety, appetite changes, whether you're eating more or less, headaches, that's when you're knowing that you're getting to the burnt out stage where it's affecting your brain chemistry. So very important is to know what things you can do so your cortisol, when it's high, you can be in that moment, but you don't get to the point where it's 3, 4, 5 days, a week out, where now it's going to start affecting your brain chemistry, those neurotransmitters, and then you're going to be experiencing all of the real cognitive, even physical experiences and manifestation of true burnout. The very first thing that I'm going to say is this. If you can experience stress in the moment, that's one of the biggest gifts, because you know that stress is going to be transient. But you have to catch yourself after the stressful or the inciting factor happens. You have to catch if you're holding on to that moment. Now, a lot of us don't even catch it, or even worse, don't want to admit it. So let's say, for example, I'm at my desk and my boss comes over and I wrote a whole report and I think I did a really good job, but he just rips it apart. Or she just rips it apart and says, you're missing this piece, where was this piece? And really communicating in a way that is really energetically fear-based and not in love or not in encouragement. It's very easy for us to have that experience. Our stress is going to go up, right? We're going to feel it in our body Maybe some of you in that moment that you can experience or you can visualize this, we can feel the tightening of our stomach or feel the tightening of our chest, right? Or we can feel anger want to come out and we want to yell back, but we don't want to lose the job. Be in that moment and allow that experience, that physiological, biological change to happen in your body through your nervous system. Let the hormones get released. Let the neurotransmitters change. Let that inflammation go up. But you have to be aware of what happens after your boss walks out of the room. What happens when you go to lunch later in the day? What happens when you get into your car? How about when you get home? Are you still thinking about it? Are you still ruminating on it? Or have you learned the things that really work for you to let go? Now, letting go is such an important part of this, the surrender part. You can have the experience, but the thing that gets you burnt out is the holding on to those things, right? A lot of us, why do we hold on to those things and how is it sponsoring our experience? So, like I said, the inciting stressful factor will stress us out. If we bring it with us for the next day, for the day after, for the week after, you can bet all of your money that you're going to get burnt out from it. The same thing goes from physical burnt out. You have to honor your body. If you're overextending yourself, saying yes to every single thing, for your own reasons, whether it's to be a people pleaser or liked, if you're not putting yourself and honoring your body first from the physical standpoint and you're overextending yourself, then you really have to think about being burnt out. Another thing, if you're just working and doing a job that you don't love, you're going to be burnt out regardless. If you're putting your energy and your time, remember I said in the beginning of the show, your biggest assets, time and attention into something you don't love, you're going to get burned out. So think about these possibilities. Think about where you fall. A lot of us fall in the mental, emotional, holding on and ruminating. But a lot of us overextend ourselves physically. A lot of us are in a job that we don't love. But regardless, those are all main ingredients for being burnt out. So I'm going to tell you what works for me. I'm going to give you my first-hand tip on what I do not to get burnt out. So for me, I have to stop completely. If I feel my body getting tired during the day when it shouldn't be tired, I should be resilient and robust and energetic. If I feel myself getting tired and shutting down, and that's how it happens for me, I shut down, I disconnect from the world, I completely stop everything. If I have plans at night, cancel, done. It doesn't matter what I was supposed to do or what I committed to. It doesn't matter if I have to talk at something and people are expecting me to be there. It's always my health that comes first so I can show up better in the future. So for me, I'll turn it off. I'll go upstairs. I'll lay down. And the thing that works so well for me is completely turning off my brain. So I'll watch a movie. I'll watch a show. I'll escape into something where I can turn off my brain in that moment, right? And I'm going to bring into perspective something. It's one thing to you chronically escape something and not look at things, but it's also another thing to just turn off. A lot of us just need to turn off. We are so stimulated with our phone and stimulated in conversation and stimulated with work and then back in our phone. If we can just turn off and just enjoy something, enjoy the art of cinema, enjoy a show, laugh. And then look, if I'm feeling really naughty, I'll go out and order a sugar-free dessert or something like that. And I'll enjoy it and I'll be in bed. And then all I need is 4 hours, 5 hours of that. Relax, go to sleep. The next day, completely gone. I'm not burnt out, but it's something that works for me. So find out what practice works for you. What do you have to say no to? What do you have to stop and come back into your body with? What do you have to stop ruminating on? Start bringing awareness to these habits, and I guarantee you that you'll be so much more empowered when an inciting event happens, when you're overextending yourself, when you're at a job that you don't love. You'll become more empowered to understand that you come first, your health comes first, because by doing that, you're able to show up for so many other people. So we're all biochemically different. We all handle stress differently, right? Some of us handle stress better than others, and that's okay. It's not our fault. But we have to listen to our body. We have to create this habit. Here in America, we're on push and grind and push and grind and I'll sleep till I die attitude. And there couldn't be a more toxic approach to your overall health. When you do something you love and you're in service to humanity, it's never really a grind at all. It's always an act of love and service that's coming from within. So ask yourself, are you burnt out because you are overworking or you're just doing something that you don't love? Because I don't care if you have the best stress resiliency, the best stress handling modalities. If you're doing something truly that is not in service to yourself and others and you're not aligned with your gifts, you're bound to get burnt out, as I mentioned. So check out all those things, do it, bring awareness to your body, bring awareness to what you're doing physically every single day, people pleasing, like overextending yourself. If you're in a job that you don't love, start bringing awareness to all of this stuff. Start putting yourself first. Start putting these practices into play, and then you will find out how powerful you are when it comes to avoiding burnout.